On the night of her anniversary, Emily Carter did what she had done every year for 11 years. She drove home early with a small cake on the passenger seat, her phone filled with unread messages from her husband Daniel, each one sounding just warm enough to feel real, just distant enough to feel practiced. And when she stepped into the house, she noticed something strange. The lights were on, but the air felt still, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. And then she heard it. A laugh.
Oh my God!
Soft, familiar,
What
impossible to
are you
mistake, because it belonged to her younger sister, Rachel. And in that moment, something inside her already knew before her eyes confirmed it. Before she walked up the stairs, before she pushed open the bedroom door and saw them, tangled together in the life she had built. Frozen in a moment they never expected her to witness, and what followed was not screaming, not tears, not the kind of collapse people imagine. It was silence, a quiet so heavy it seemed to press against her chest, because in that instant, Emily didn't just lose a husband or a sister, she lost the version of her life she had trusted, and as she stood there watching them scramble for words that would never be enough, something shifted, something calm. Something deliberate. And over the next year, she would not leave. She would not forgive. She would not forget. She would dismantle everything they thought they had taken from her piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. So the question is not what happened that night. Now the question is how far someone can go when the people they love become the ones who betray them. This is the story of three people: Emily Carter, a woman who built her world on loyalty and quiet strength; Daniel Carter, a man who knew how to say the right things and hide the wrong ones; and Rachel Hayes, a sister who had spent her life standing just close enough to admire and just far enough to resent. And at first glance, their lives looked like something out of a picture frame. Holidays spent together,
This looks amazing.
shared laughter,
It really
traditions
does.
that
Smells
felt
incredible.
unbreakable.
I agree, you outdid
But
yourself.
beneath those moments
Thank
were
you.
choices.
I'm glad.
Small
Pass some
ones at
potatoes,
first.
please.
A glance
course.
held too long. A conversation that lingered after everyone else had left. A message sent at the wrong time. And the truth is, betrayals like this rarely begin with a single decision. They are built slowly, quietly, until the line between right and wrong becomes something easy to step over. So was this something that grew over time, or something that was always waiting to happen? Who crossed that line first? And when Emily finally chose to respond, why did her actions leave more than just a broken marriage? Why did they leave a trail that changed all three of their lives in ways none of them could reverse? Because by the end of this story, the lines between victim and consequence begin to blur, and the answer may not be as simple as it first seems. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Emily and Rachel grew up in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. The kind of place where neighbors knew each other's routines and families built their lives around consistency, and from an early age, Emily took on the role of the dependable one, the sister who followed through, who kept things together, who made sure birthdays were remembered and problems were handled before they grew too large, while Rachel was different, more expressive, more restless. Someone who wanted more than what was in front of her, but wasn't always sure how to reach it. And despite their differences, they were close, the kind of closeness that comes from shared childhoods and unspoken understanding, the kind that makes betrayal feel impossible. And when Emily met Daniel in her late 20s, it felt like another piece of her life falling into place. He was confident, attentive, the kind of man who made people feel seen. And their relationship moved steadily, predictably, into marriage, into a home, into a life that seemed secure. And for years, Rachel was part of that life too, visiting often, celebrating milestones, becoming someone Daniel trusted and Emily relied on. And yet, over time, small changes began to appear. Daniel staying later at work, conversations that felt shorter, Rachel showing up unannounced, lingering just a little longer than before, moments that didn't seem important on their own. But together, created a quiet tension that no one spoke about. And looking back, Emily would later realize that the signs had always been there. Not obvious, not loud, but present in the spaces where trust slowly begins to shift. And the truth is, and sometimes the things we choose not to question are the very things that change everything. In the weeks leading up to that night, Emily noticed patterns she couldn't quite explain. Daniel's phone lighting up at odd hours, conversations that ended when she entered the room, Rachel canceling plans only to appear later with excuses that didn't fully make sense. And still, Emily told herself it was nothing, because the alternative required a kind of doubt she wasn't ready to face. And on the evening of their anniversary, when Daniel said he would be working late, it felt like another small disappointment in a series she had begun to accept. So she made a decision, a simple one, to come home early, to salvage what she could of the night, and as she stepped into the house and heard Rachel's voice upstairs, everything slowed, not in panic, but in recognition, because somewhere deep inside, she already understood what she was about to see. And when she opened that door, there were no explanations that could undo it, no words that could reshape what had already happened. Just the quiet realization that the two people she trusted most had chosen each other in a way that left no room for her. And in that moment, Emily didn't react the way people expected. She didn't shout or break down. She stood there, taking it in, letting the weight of it settle into something steady, something controlled. And as Daniel began to speak and Rachel tried to explain, Emily said nothing.
How could you do this?
Because she had already made a decision she wouldn't fully understand until much later. And as she walked out of that room, closing the door behind her, it wasn't the end of something. Yes, it was the beginning of something far more deliberate, because what she chose to do next would not be driven by impulse. It would be guided by patience, and that is what made it something no one saw coming. In the days that followed, Emily did something unexpected. She stayed, not emotionally, not in the way she had before, but physically, strategically. She remained present in a life that no longer belonged to her in the same way, and instead of confronting them again, she began to observe, to listen, to pay attention to details she had once overlooked. And what she found was not just an affair. It was a pattern of decisions that extended far beyond their relationship, financial accounts she hadn't known about, transactions that didn't align with what Daniel had shared, conversations between him and Rachel that revealed more than just emotional involvement. And as she uncovered these pieces, a different picture began to form, one that showed her that the betrayal was not sudden. It had been developing over time, built on secrecy and quiet justifications, and rather than reacting, Emily documented everything. She consulted professionals quietly, learned how to protect herself legally and financially, and began to restructure her life in ways that Daniel and Rachel could not see. And to them, she appeared distant, subdued, someone processing loss in a way they interpreted as weakness. But in reality, she was making decisions that would reshape the outcome of everything. And as weeks turned into months, the balance of control shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, but steadily. And the question that lingered was not whether she would leave, but how she would do it, and what would be left behind when she did. When Emily finally acted, it was not sudden, it was precise. A series of steps executed with clarity and intention, legal filings prepared in advance, financial protections already in place, evidence organized in a way that left little room for dispute. And when Daniel received the documents, it was the first moment he began to understand the extent of what she had been doing, because the life he believed was secure had already begun to shift without him noticing. And Rachel, who had assumed the relationship would replace what Emily had, found herself facing consequences she hadn't anticipated, professional relationships affected, personal connections strained, and as the process unfolded, and the reality became clear, Emily had not just chosen to leave, She had chosen to ensure that the terms of that departure reflected the truth of what had happened, and by the time Daniel attempted to respond, to negotiate, to explain, the structure of his life had already changed in ways he could not easily reverse. And in those moments, the control he once held was no longer his, and the realization of that shift carried a weight neither he nor Rachel had prepared for. In the end, Emily walked away with what she had secured, a future rebuilt on her own terms, a life no longer tied to the people who had broken her trust. And from the outside, it might have appeared as though she had achieved exactly what she set out to do. She had protected herself. She had ensured accountability. She had moved forward. But the truth was more complicated. Because even when the process was complete, even when the legal and financial aspects were resolved, there remained something that could not be restored. The sense of trust that once defined her relationships, the connection she had with her sister, the belief that certain bonds were unbreakable, and in quiet moments those losses remained, not as something overwhelming but as something permanent, a reminder that some actions carry consequences that extend beyond immediate outcomes. And as time passed, Emily learned to live with that reality, not as someone seeking closure, but as someone who understood that closure does not always come in the way we expect. And the question that remained was not whether she had been justified, but whether justice, in this case, had truly given her what she needed. So what would you have done if you were in Emily's place? Would you have walked away the moment you discovered the truth? Or would you have stayed long enough to make sure the outcome reflected what was taken from you? Who do you believe holds the greatest responsibility in this story? And do you think her response went too far or not far enough? Share your thoughts below because stories like this often leave more questions than answers. And if this is the kind of storytelling that stays with you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the next story explores a situation where the lines between loyalty and betrayal are even harder to define, and the consequences reach further than anyone expected.